called the 3 biggest lies of the weight loss industry. You know those massive corporations? The ones who sell you healthy shakes, meals, and exercise plans? They know full well that they don't work. All of the countless medical studies make this abundantly clear to anyone who has bothered to look. And I assure you they have looked. You see, the whole industry is a giant fraud. Its only purpose is to separate you from your hard-earned money. They don't care that it doesn't work. In fact, they don't want it to work, because that way they can keep selling you their stuff. Their business model will be destroyed if the world finds out they can break free and lose weight naturally without their useless diets and exercises. It's big business, and a business they will fight to protect. One big lie that costs us over $250 billion each year. Sure, you may lose a few pounds in the first weeks or months with their plans, but research shows that 95% regain that lost weight within 1 year, and most put on even more on top. Which brings us to the big weight loss lie number 1, that dieting helps you lose weight. It doesn't. A huge study involving over 4,500 subjects found that among both men and women, irregular eating and continuous attempts to lose weight were the 2 key factors that actually predicted weight gain. This has to do with how we're built, Chen explained. You see, in the distant past, we didn't have access to 7-Elevens or Whole Foods. We never knew when we were going to get the next meal. So when we got food, our body had to somehow find a way to make it last until whenever it thought the next time was going to be. We evolved to store the energy as fat, meaning we could still stay active and alive when there was no food available, even for days. It used our hormones, the body's chemical messenger, to regulate this. So that's why when you starve or deprive yourself of particular nutrients, including fats and carbs, your hormones will tell you to eat and store as much as possible to prepare for the famine it thinks is about to happen. Therefore, eating less actually causes you to store fat. So, in order to actually lose weight and keep it off forever, you need to deal with your hormones, not your food. Something we'll talk about in more detail in a minute. Which brings us to big weight loss lie number 2. This one was shocking to me, and it's related to exercise. I mean, how often do you hear that to lose fat, you must grind away hour upon hour of tedious exercise? The thinking goes that exercise helps you burn calories, so helps you lose weight. While this may sound like logical sense, it simply isn't true. A study published in the American Journal of Medicine that reviewed and analyzed 14 randomized controlled trials of over 1,800 people concluded that isolated aerobic exercise is not an effective weight loss therapy in obese or overweight patients. This is thought to be due to people tending to vastly overestimate how much energy they actually burn, so end up overcompensating. Excessive exercise also causes an increase in cortisol, also known as the stress hormone, which has been shown to encourage fat storage, particularly around the belly and face. So, in other words, all those hours of grinding away hour upon boring hour on the exercise cycle can be for nothing, even though that's exactly what most trainers and weight loss companies recommend. And with that, Chen revealed big weight loss lie number 3. Overweight and obese people have a slower metabolism. This is not only totally false, but the exact opposite is true. Research shows that overweight people have a faster metabolism than thinner people. This is because larger bodies require more energy to carry out basic functions. Certain crash diets and other calorie-restricted ones can actually slow your metabolism down. Your body is forced to break down muscle to use for energy. The lower your muscle mass, the slower your metabolism. It then becomes a lot easier to put fat back on after coming off the diet. So if you've been told these 3 things before, that lack of exercise, not dieting enough, or a sluggish metabolism is the reason you're overweight, you've been purposely lied to. These factors have no influence whatsoever on the long-term number on your scale, because they don't address the real root cause. What is the real root cause, I asked. He thought for a moment and then took a picture from the center of the table. He poured the contents into a glass and placed it in front of me. "This is," he said as he pointed to the glass, Water? I asked. Yes and no. You see, what you think is a glass of fresh, clean water is actually teeming with little foreign particles. And these are what's making us fat. Serious? I said with a chuckle. Deadly, he answered, without a hint of sarcasm. You see, this water contains millions of microscopic pieces of plastic. And this plastic is made up of chemicals that can actually cause you to store fat. Plastic? I asked. How do you know there's plastic in it? It's in practically all drinking water on the planet. You see, when plastic is disposed of, it can't biodegrade. But what happens is that over time it starts to break down into smaller and smaller pieces, eventually becoming what is known as microplastics. These particles of plastics are so tiny that you can't even spot them with the naked eye. But they are now everywhere, in our rivers, our seas, our fish, even the very air you breathe. They've even been found in rain, and filtration systems can't remove them because they're too small. So they end up in our tap water. And here is something that will shock you. The average person unknowingly eats, swallows, and breathes in thousands of tiny pieces of plastic each week. An amount that equals the weight of a credit card. A week! Now, stay with me here for a minute, because this is where it gets very interesting. Plastic is found all over the world in millions of different products, and scientists are only just now beginning to understand how harmful it can be. You see, it's made up of many different chemicals, some of which are obesogens, meaning they make you fat. Obesogens are chemicals that are endocrine or hormonal disruptors. They wreak havoc on your hormone health. That includes those hormones that control hunger and how many calories you consume get burned right away and how many are stored as fat. A shocking 2015 Canadian study also found that when normal stem cells are exposed to obesogens, they can actually mutate into fat cells. Another study in Japan confirmed this by showing cells which would normally become connective tissue became fat cells when obesogens were added. Chen took out his phone and showed me this video. This is what happens when regular stem cells are exposed to obesogens. They turn into fat cells and expand instantly. Shocking, right? And that's what obesogens found in microplastics are doing to your body all day long. That's why it's so hard to lose weight no matter what you try. And it's the reason that keeping the pounds off long term is almost impossible. Now, there are many types of obesogens, of which bisphenol A, or BPA as it's known, is one of the most widely known. BPA can be found in thousands of different types of products, from kids' toys, clothing, cosmetics like body wash, shampoo, and toothpaste, all the way up to food packaging, canned goods, and even baby bottles. A team from the Department of Neuroscience in Ontario found that when they fed mice low doses of BPA, far lower than the amounts considered to be safe by the FDA, their hormones started freaking out and they quickly ballooned in size. Some countries have even taken the step of banning BPA in anything that comes in contact with food. But the chemicals they have replaced it with are arguably worse. And it's not just plastics that contain these obesogens. They are also found in your car exhaust fumes, especially diesel, as well as in commonly used pesticides, and even the nonstick coating on pots and pans we cook with. That's why it's almost impossible to avoid exposure. And countless studies have directly linked these obesogens to excessive ghrelin, leptin, hunger, and obesity, regardless of age, genetics, diet, metabolism, or even activity level. So your hunger pangs and weight gain has been scientifically proven to be unstoppable because of these man-made chemicals that are floating throughout your body, wreaking havoc with your hormones and causing normal cells to turn into expanded fat cells. Just consider the following. This graph shows the rise in obesity rates over the years. Like I said, obesity was pretty much non-existent before the 1950s. But fast forward to today, 72% of us are overweight. Now, look at this. The blue line shows the rise in synthetic chemical production over the years, and the red one, the rates of diabetes. Notice how they match almost exactly. But what I was told next by Chen was even more shocking. He had taken all of his data that proved conclusively that it was chemical obesogens that were to blame for this massive crisis, and showed it to the head of his department. The very next day, he was told to destroy the research and never speak of it again. And if any of the findings were leaked, there would be serious consequences for him and his family. So he had no choice but to bury it. He went on to explain that China is the largest producer of chemicals and plastics in the world by a very large margin. So the Chinese government were terrified of a global backlash if the effects were exposed, because it could destroy their economy. So instead of risking that, they decided to hide it. It finally all made perfect sense. The out-of-control obesity crisis really wasn't being caused by the junk food and lazy lifestyles like we are constantly being told. It was actually things like microplastics and modern-day pollution that were causing hormonal problems, making it virtually impossible for us to lose the weight and keep it off, no matter what we do, and no matter how hard we try. Exactly what was happening with Amy. Now, although these dangerous substances are wreaking havoc inside every person who struggles with weight loss, the truth is, your belly, arm, hip, and thigh fat are not a life sentence. It's actually reversible, explained Chen. You see, although my research was shut down, I was still extremely worried for my family and friends. After all, wasn't it my duty to protect them if I could? I didn't want them continually being poisoned by all these toxic substances, causing them to spiral into obesity and major health issues. But although I now knew the real root cause, what could be done? I couldn't make the whole world stop using plastics, cars, or all of those other obesogenic pollutants. In fact, even if we did, wouldn't make much difference, because the toxins are already everywhere in our environment. It could take hundreds or even thousands of years to clean up this mess, and that wouldn't help us right now. So I figured that my only option was to try to find a way to detoxify these obesogens from our body, to try to reverse the damage already done and protect against it in the future. So I spent every waking moment researching to find a solution, going through years and years of medical studies. It was a long, hard struggle, but I eventually made a breakthrough, and it came from a very unusual place. I stumbled across an article in a scientific journal. It wrote of a small village in the outskirts of Tibet. The people there seemingly had the lowest rates of diabetes and heart disease in the world, and their average life expectancy was 25% higher than anywhere else. But no one could figure out why. This was extremely interesting, because it seemed to confirm